Police officers are being seen a lot right now on YouTube videos and on cell phone videos, really getting in trouble and violating people's rights. What's the most common mistake police make? Let's discuss. So if you're a police officer or you're thinking about becoming a police officer, this is something you're definitely going to watch. And if you're a civilian, this is something you're definitely going to want to watch too, because just like doctors get sued for malpractice and nurses, and you have bad teachers out there and bad engineers and bad construction workers and bad companies in general, every now and then you have a bad police officer that is either trained poorly, not trained enough, or maybe just has a kind of authoritarian complex, and you may need to know what they're doing is not correct. So here we go. What is the most common mistake police officers make? Police officers are always violating this one thing. When I say always, I just mean the ones that are violating this. This is the same thing. And that is Fourth Amendment, which is the people's right to be secured in their personal effects and papers, which from illegal search and seizure. You, as police officers, or if you're becoming a police officer, or if you're a civilian, police cannot just walk up to someone and start searching them. They need different levels of criteria, so to say, that's the word I'm looking for, to be able to take investigations to the next step. So what does that mean? Let's start with a traffic stop. Say you blew through a red light, or you blew through a stop sign, or you blew through or you're speeding, that's the other common one. And as a police officer, you roll up on someone and you stop them. As a civilian, you get stopped, you pull over, you're like, oh shoot, man, I'm getting a ticket. Well, as a police officer, you can't just walk up there and say, hey, step out, I'm gonna search your vehicle. For a simple traffic infraction, it's not gonna work. You're gonna need more than that to do it. And for civilians, what that means is you do not have to say, okay, go ahead and search my vehicle, because what happens is technically at that point, it could be conveyed as consent. And law enforcement officers either need reasonable articulable suspicion and more so over probable cause to search a vehicle to violate someone's Fourth Amendment right, or they need your consent. And that's what most police officers go for. And if you're a police officer or you're wanting to become a police officer, that's what they're going to train you in the academy, is try to gain consent. Because if you gain consent, you're free and you're legally covered the entire time. Now, when it comes to a traffic stop, the courts have already ruled that you have a little less reasonable expectation to privacy, REP, when in your vehicle, opposed to say your home or property. But that doesn't mean that it's not there. So for law enforcement, what that means for you is if you're walking up and you're shining your flashlight in the window, or you're looking through the window and you see something that is potentially a crime or illegal activity, then you're developing the reasonable suspicion or probable cause based on what you see that another crime has happened. Without that, as I said, the courts have ruled, you can only detain that person as long as necessary to complete the initial traffic stop. So that means if they're speeding, you only can keep them there long enough to have a person give you their required information. And we're not going to go into what a person is supposed to give you. That's covered in another video if you all want to watch that. But their required information, and then go back, run their information as required, and then go back and issue a citation or issue a warning, and then release the individual. Now, if you see something that will lead you to believe that another crime is going on, then you can pursue further or detain longer as a police officer, or if you're a new cop coming in. Civilians, this is something you want to know too. If you detain longer, you have to be able to reasonably articulate, and once again, like other videos, reasonable articulation means that another person, given your same exact scenario, would come to the same conclusion you would, or a similar conclusion that you would. So you walk up and you see a gun case in the back seat that has the gun in it. Now, or it does have a gun in it, but it's in the case. Now, you're in a state where it's perfectly legal to transport a firearm, or it's perfectly legal to have an open, plain view firearm, or to carry open, as we say it in certain states, or open carry. At that point in time, you do not get to search the vehicle, and you do not get to take that firearm from that individual. That's not how the law works. The way it works is, now courts have ruled that you are allowed to ask a driver and the passengers to step out of the vehicle for officer safety, but once again, you have to be able to reasonably articulate officer safety, and having a firearm in the vehicle is usually one way to do it. However, if it's locked, cased, and out of the reach of the operator or anyone in the vehicle, you're going to have a hard time selling that, and you're setting yourself up for a lawsuit and your agency for a lawsuit. The other side to this is the fact that you really need to, for civilians, you really need to make sure you're on your P's and Q's and you have everything you need, because every time you don't have what you need, you are allowing that police officer to extend the stop and extend your detainment based on the fact that they could not perform the functions they needed to due to your delay or your lag, whether that's providing a driver's license or insurance or registration, anything like that. Now, going back to the gun, that's not a reason if you're in a state that allows that firearm to be legally carried in that manner. But what happens if you're driving down and you see what appears to be packaged marijuana or packaged narcotics or drug paraphernalia right there in plain view? Yes, 100%. You stop them from seeing, you see that. Now you've just given yourself an opening to get into, to search that vehicle. And once again, remember, vehicles have a little bit reasonable expectation of privacy. So there's laws out there that fall under what we call mobile conveyance, which allows an officer to search a vehicle if there's reasonably believe there's reasonable suspicion or probable cause that evidence of a crime is in that vehicle. And this is an exception to needing a warrant in order to search someone's vehicle. This is what we call a warrant exception. So if it's in plain view and the officer sees it, then 100% you are good to go. There's some argument right now with the odor of marijuana, whether or not that gives an officer reasonable articulable suspicion to warrant further investigation. And at that point in time, they would have a dog come out and sniff. However, law enforcement, listen, there's a new case law on that came out. It's not even that new anymore. It's a few years old, where it just says you cannot detain someone any longer unless you have reasonable articulable suspicion that drug is in there. And the odor of marijuana is not cutting it anymore, mostly because most states are going to decriminalize or legalize marijuana. So stop using the odor of marijuana if that's all you got. If, at that point in time, if you convince the individual to provide you with information saying, yes, there is marijuana in the car and marijuana is illegal, great, then you can extend the stop. But just on the odor of marijuana, you all want to be careful on that for those of you going into law enforcement. Don't let the older law enforcement officers who are stuck on a certain way because it's been that way for their entire career. It's anybody, it's not just law enforcement, it's any profession has a hard time transitioning to a new thing, and most of the time they're really unequipped and training kind of falls short sometimes. So anyway, searching that vehicle, that Fourth Amendment violation, you really need to have a probable cause to really violate someone's Fourth Amendment right. Seeing the firearm and it's legally being carried, that's not Fourth Amendment. Having someone say, hey, I'm a concealed carry holder, here's my permit, here's all my documentation, not a reason to search someone's vehicle, especially if they say, hey, it's on my right hip, I'm keeping my hands up here. Now you could say, hey, for officer safety, I'm gonna have you step out of the vehicle. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean you're going to be able to remove that firearm from someone? Be very careful there, because that is a seizure of someone's property, and you need to be able to articulate why you felt that someone was a threat. Just because they're legally carrying a firearm does not make them a threat. They are doing everything the way that the law says. That does not mean, now if they're being aggressive or they seem agitated or they keep gesturing to the firearm, that's something completely different. But in the meantime, you just can't say, hey, get out, I'm gonna remove your firearm. You can't do that. It's not legal. You're gonna get yourself and your agency sued, and you're gonna lose your qualified immunity, which means they're gonna be able to come after you civilly, you and your personal assets of you and your spouse or your entire family. And that's the way that the world's going. And that's the barrier that's in place right now to prevent law enforcement from abusing authority. When you're looking at this legal aspect when it comes to Fourth Amendment violations, you really need to dive into the law. You really need to read case law. It comes down to, do you know what you can legally and not legally do, both constitutionally and civilly, so on the federal level, and then your state requirements too, because sometimes the states put even greater restriction on law enforcement. Perfect example is most law enforcement can't actually do a high-speed pursuit. They must peel off and just kind of give last known direction. So keep that in mind. Listen, down below, if you're looking to become a police officer, down below we have a free gift for you. We have a guide for you to learn how to completely get hired, go through the hiring process. It's an ultimate guide for getting hired as a police officer. Or we have a free conference call, coaching call is really what it is, with me or a member of the team, where we can walk you through and get you set up on your steps moving forward. Whichever one you want, it's our gift to you. Let us know, sign up down below. As always, stay safe, like, share, subscribe for me. Help me build this community so that everyone has a place that they can go to, feel safe, ask questions they want. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.